This is Handled by the Y Variable, the show where we bridge generations in the workplace with strategy that sticks. Each week, we translate the untold rules of work into actionable insights, real challenges between managers and early career talent. No buzzwords, no generic advice, just practical frameworks that actually work for both sides. If this is your first time listening, I'd love it if you liked, subscribed, and commented on this episode, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening to the podcast. Here is what managers are observing. There's a pattern showing up around risk taking, or maybe more accurately, risk avoidance. So, not big, dramatic risks. We're talking small, professional risks. The kind that used to be just sort of this normal part of working. Picking up the phone to call someone instead of sending an email, walking down the hall to have a conversation with someone you don't have a relationship with yet, but who could really help to move your work forward, asking a question in a meeting, volunteering for a project that maybe is a little bit outside of your comfort zone, taking feedback and trying a different approach without spiraling. These aren't high-stakes moments, but increasingly managers are noticing hesitation, or what a lot of us would call analysis paralysis. It's a reluctance to do things that aren't maybe in someone's natural mode of communication. And underneath it all, it seems like there is this question: what if I mess up? But here's what's really underneath that question. For a lot of Gen Z, the real fear isn't just messing up. It can be a story that they have in their heads, that there might be a confirmation of that maybe they don't belong there in the first place, or it's about being embarrassed in front of the team, or looking like you don't belong in the room. They're worried about confirming that fear that they have about being the youngest one or the one who doesn't get it. Now this is where it gets interesting. In that conversation at the event, we started talking about our own early careers, those of us who are millennial or Gen X. And someone said something that really landed for me. We got to learn and make mistakes without social media. Think about that for a second. I know when I was coming up, if I made a mistake, even if it was a public one, the number of witnesses was really limited. Maybe it was my immediate team. Maybe it was people in my department. Maybe it was just one client. But it stayed contained, and I could course correct quickly. I could get feedback from one or two people I trusted, and I didn't need a whole PR strategy for a misstep in a Tuesday meeting. But now, everything feels so public. Everything feels like it could be exposed and dissected, like someone might, take a screenshot and share it with thousands of people. You can unwittingly become a viral sensation, and not in the way that you want. Even small mistakes, the kind that are actually inconsequential in the long run, they feel enormous because they seem ripe for public scrutiny. So the calculation around, whether or not it's worth trying or maybe taking some extra steps has fundamentally changed. So when any mistake feels like it could follow you forever, or you've grown up watching people get mocked and pilloried online for really minor missteps, when you've seen how quickly the internet can turn on someone, of course, the instinct is going to be to play it safe. Of course, the instinct is going to be to avoid anything that could go wrong. That's not automatically weakness. I actually think that's kind of a rational response to the environment that so many people are navigating. If this is resonating so far, I would love it if you would hit like or leave a comment. It helps this conversation reach more managers and early career professionals who really need to hear it. But here is the tension managers are sitting with. They see this hesitation and they understand, many of them, where it's coming from. But they also know that careers are marathons, not sprints, and they're concerned. It's not annoyance, it's real concern. Because if small professional risks feel insurmountable now, how do you build the muscle for bigger challenges later? How do you develop the resilience you're going to need for the long haul? Let me be clear. When I say resilience, I'm not talking about some sort of vague, toughen up sort of mentality. I'm talking about really specific capabilities, like the ability to handle feedback without it completely derailing you, or the ability to take a calculated risk and know the difference between a big risk and a small one. It's also the ability to build professional relationships even when it feels awkward or you're worried about judgment. It's the willingness to try something in a different mode than maybe you're used to make that phone call instead of sending the text, to have that face to face conversation instead of hiding behind a Slack channel. And it's about hustling a bit. And when I say that, I'm not talking about hustle culture, I'm not talking about working yourself into the ground. I mean having agency, having energy behind your actions, and being proactive. It means being willing to do things that take you slightly beyond your comfort zone because that's where actual growth happens. And here's what I want to acknowledge because I think there's an important nuance that matters, that's really important. Not all Gen Z are struggling with this. Because if you grew up with maybe less privilege, if you were lower income, for example, maybe you're an immigrant kid who came as a teenager or your family came, as refugees, your circumstances have likely already helped you to build this resilience. You've had to navigate challenges that required you to take risks. You've been hustling. You had to figure things out without a safety net. And that resilience is really incredibly valuable in the workplace, and I want you to know that. And on the other side of that, if you've maybe had more comfort or stability, if work is maybe the first place where you're really bumping against failure and conflict or maybe some level of ambiguity, doesn't automatically mean that you're soft. It just means this is maybe your first real training ground. And I'm not putting blame on you or, even larger society, but it's about getting in the reps. It's about recognizing that building resilience requires practice. Maybe you're just getting your first opportunities to practice that now. And that's also partly a modeling issue. A lot of what I learned and, my fellow millennials and Gen X's, we learned to take professional risks by watching the adults around us do it. I saw people pick up phones. I saw people walk into offices and start conversations. I witnessed people trying things. They failed, they adjusted, they kept going, and it all happened in real time. And I was in that same physical space. I was in the doorways, I was listening to the calls, I was taking notes when those calls happened. I watched how my bosses handled a bad meeting in real time. So if you're a manager and you're listening to this or watching this, think about how much you learned just by overhearing your boss on the phone or watching them smooth over a tense client meeting. Gen Z often doesn't get that front row seat. A lot of that happens, on mute, on Zoom, or maybe in DMs that they will never see. So much of work happens digitally now. So much communication is mediated through screens. If you haven't seen people navigate these small risks up close, if you haven't had it modeled for you, how in the world are you supposed to know what's normal? So let's go back to those managers that I was talking about before, the ones who do care, the ones who are trying to figure this out. They're not sitting around judging you. They are sitting around asking, how do I help this person see that this phone call isn't actually dangerous? How do I help them understand that walking down the hall to introduce themselves to someone is not only okay, in fact, it's how you build your career. They're asking, how do I create an environment where they feel safe enough to take these small risks, to make these mistakes, without feeling like their entire professional reputation is on the line? Because here's what they know that you might not know yet. The people who thrive in their careers long term are the ones who are willing to be uncomfortable sometimes, who are willing to try things that might not work, and who understand that mistakes are information. They're not your identity. And they want that for you too. They want you to have staying power. They want you to build a resilience you're going to need, not just to survive in the workplace, but to actually thrive in it. So one simple shift for managers right now, instead of labeling what you're seeing as a lack of resilience, try asking, where has this person actually had a chance to practice this skill? That question maybe is going to change how you coach your team. And if you're hearing this and thinking, okay, I see that, I recognize some of this in myself, but what do I actually do about it? Well, there's going to be part 2 to this video. That's where we're going to get really practical and we'll talk about how to tell the difference between a low risk experiment and maybe something that's more career level risk. And there are questions that Gen Z can ask themselves to assess that risk. And there'll be some opportunities to talk about what managers can do to help Gen Z to practice in an environment where they can actually make mistakes, where it's allowed. But first, I just wanted to make sure that you understand that this conversation is happening. So those of you who are Gen Z, you need to know what managers are seeing and more importantly, why they are concerned. And it's not because they think you're broken, but because they see potential in you and they want to help you reach it. Okay, there's always, those two audiences in our shows. So if you're a manager, first you, listening to this, I want you to know that you're not alone. This is a real pattern, and other leaders are also navigating this. And if you're early career, Gen Z, and you're hearing this for the first time, well, now you know. The question ultimately is, what are you going to do with that information? And of course, we're going to tackle that in part 2. If you found this to be helpful, please subscribe and follow so you don't miss part 2. If you're watching on YouTube, drop a comment. I'd love to hear whether this resonates with your experience, whether you're a manager or early in your career. This is the type of work that I love to do, not just here on YouTube or the podcast, but in real life. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you want some help, if you're looking for some workshops or training that will help you in this regard. I'm Yahima, and this is handled by the Y variable. I'll see you next time.